welcome everybody. I'm Laura Giles, and this is Modern Animism Radio. And I have with me here today Rick West and Lanvi Nguyen, and we're going to be sharing our take on animism and the art and how the two intersect. As we always say, animism is about living in relationship with everything. In today's case, art. I know that some people who are new to animism think it's just about holy days and rituals, but it really does permeate your whole life if you let it. And the holy days and rituals, to me, is kind of like the icing, and we're going to be talking about the cake. So before we get into that, though, let's give gratitude to the elements. So I acknowledge the element of earth, and thank you for our home, our bodies, our senses that bring everything to life. I acknowledge and give gratitude to the air, and I ask that you bring us clear communication for today's podcast, so that's what is meant to be said will be said, and what's meant to be heard will be heard. I acknowledge the element of fire. We're getting close to the winter solstice where the sun's fire returns. I'm missing that warmth, so I want to give gratitude to fire for always burning in our hearts, even when we can't feel it so much outside. I acknowledge and give gratitude for water. So thank you, water, for giving us the courage to go deep, to see our shadow, feel our feelings, so that we can grow beyond our present limitations. I acknowledge our plant, animal, mineral, and human ancestors, and thank you for the blessings that are seen and unseen. May we grow ever more conscious of how we move together in the web of life so that our choices are authentic to us and honor everybody in the web. And thanks to all our listeners for being here today. Our podcast, YouTube channel, and Facebook groups continue to grow because of you. So thank you for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And if you'd like to support us with a donation, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Pan Society. So thank you for being here, Rick and Lanvi. How are y'all today?
Thank you for having us, Laura. We're very good.
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you. Yes, this should be fun.
So you guys are both, we had originally talked about doing performing arts, but you guys are visual artists as well. Was there something in particular that you do to bring animism into your art, or that in a way that it reflects in your art?
Animism and art, that's a real interesting concept. The first thing I guess I would say about just art in general is it's really hard to talk about a lot of what the emotion, the process of art, because, well, honestly, the language isn't quite big enough. But let's see what we can do. Let's talk about how that works. How does the fact that everything around us have a spark of consciousness, how does that change what we're doing? Well, basically, the way I see it, I'll come around back to that, but art is a process by which I transfer my living conscious energy into a whole separate units of conscious energy who take it sort of like a DNA and transfer it and transform it, and art, performance in particular, but performance kind of gets the DNA rolling through the social body, if you will. And I think that's what these are about. These are like little, performance is this little pod that sort of pulses out to the people and tightens the social contract, if you will, tightens the social milieu in ways that if this were just a material world, it wouldn't make sense to talk about that. But because it's an animistic world, because I see it as jillions of consciousness units floating around, and every time you perform, some of those units pick up the thing that you're putting out and transfer it, transform it, make it something new, and it keeps rolling. So when you have an idea, a friend of mine says people don't have ideas, ideas have people. And if an idea comes and finds you and forces its way through you out through that performance out to all the other consciousness out there, it's a transformative experience both for the artist and hopefully for the person who's listening. So that's my take on it. But plenty to talk about in that, all that. But yeah, that's sort of a nutshell. Thanks.
Continuing
this is why. Go ahead, Lanvi.
I was saying about how like the inspiration or the idea is us, instead of the other way around, that we are like the vessel that is the inspiration once it finds us. And then, like Rick was saying, how it transpires and becomes a performance out of us as if we are the ones who unfolds that specific inspiration.
Yeah, this is why we have podcasts.
Yes.
You took that. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. And as you were saying, I was like, yeah. But it's. I was totally going in a totally different direction. So when I was thinking, so I'm a dancer, and I've been a belly dancer for 16 years. I was a professional belly dancer for 16 years, and I've been repeating this lately because it's just been so relevant. But how you do anything is how you do everything, and how I do dance, I feel is. I mean, I don't think this is unique to me. I'm sure other performing artists do this too. But I think it is very holistic, which is to me animistic, because when I'm performing, so I was having this conversation with somebody else a while back, which is how we got the topic for this show. And they were talking about performing art, and I wasn't thinking of myself as a performing artist. And it's funny that I was a professional for that long and don't think of myself as a performing artist, because I think in the West, when you think of somebody, you think of the star, like the lead of the band. It's the person that all eyes are on that person. They're the headliner, and it's kind of like a one-way thing. So they're performing for you. Your eyes are on them. And when I'm performing, that's not the experience that I'm having at all. So it's me and the band are the show, and us and the audience, and the music is holding us up, and the room is containing us, and it's like our show versus my show.
Yes, for sure. Cool.
So, yeah, we're making it all up we're making it up based on who's having a good time, who's crying, who's laughing, who's doing this, and it's just, it's a spontaneous sharing of stuff, energy, emotions, all of that.
It's imagine it's like that with more molecular level, a smaller level.
Yeah. Imagine it's like that with visual arts as well.
Yeah, it's funny. Art's big enough to be all those things. Art is sort of encompasses all three of us just talked about of different aspects, and it's very cool because art is all those things, and animism is all that. Visual art is like, well, I just in general, I think of performance. I kind of yin and yang the performance too, and I think about public performance and private performance, and even a little bit of my background. A little bit, I've done theater. That's why I've done plenty of bit parts in theater where I'm not the star at all. Where it's a whole team. In fact, ensemble theater's just a great deal of fun for exactly the reason you're talking about. You get to share camaraderie in front of everybody and sort of create more camaraderie as you do it, which is very cool.
And that's in the human form, right? Like in the person form. Like, because we're talking about the actual, like, the human body. And then I was just thinking, like, before saying, like, it goes on to, like, even a more molecular level, like inanimate things, like into the art, right? Which we're taking, like, the living, we're embedding that essence into something static and,
true.
Like not breathing, right? Like a picture, but within the picture, there's still performance and there's still performing artists in it, right? If you have a picture of a dancer in the picture, it continues on. And then
absolutely, that's great. Yeah, and the mirror.
Yes, and then how it passes on is that the next person viewing that or seeing that imagery in the art, they take that dancer and they animate that essence with their own imagination. So then, again, it's like this sort of like co-inspiration and bringing it back to life, right? Like the image and whoever's seeing it, whoever's viewing it, then brings it back to life. And then I would kind of say like the visual art or the page or the canvas or whatever, it becomes kind of like a holding place, kind of like where the art rests. and it's like, okay, all the performers on the stage are at rest. They're taking a 15-minute break until the next person picks it up and puts their energy into animating it again.
Yeah, it's sitting there kind of like a sack, and people take things out and put things in, and the piece just keeps growing and working. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, things. It's a very static thing to do, which is to paint or even like filter pictures, however you get to the photographic art.
Right.
It's very static, but you're creating this thing. It's a whole different kind of thought process than when you're doing performing, because when you're performing, you're just spitting it out there. And typically, before a performance, you're talking to the gods about, oh my God, because everybody seems to. I've been around pros, honestly. I mean, I'm not. I've done stage, or I also have done performance theater. In addition to that, have been on stage musically. I play guitar, piano, that sort of thing. I used to do the scene, but far better players and performers than me say the butterflies just never go away when you do that, because and I think it's for the very reason we're talking about. You just know something special is about to happen before you step out there. And if you, even guys that are doing it 100 times a year say it's still a rush. Yeah, it's a growing animated thing. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
That's interesting that you say that about butterflies, because there's only been 2 times in my career that I was nervous, and it was the first time. I never did it before. And then one time I just totally blacked out. And I think what happened was I started thinking, and I got in my head about, oh my God, the audience is this big, blah, 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 all of these things. And I just couldn't dance. I couldn't, it was like I'd never heard the music before. I couldn't feel my feet. It was just so bizarre. But when I'm performing, it's in this zone where all that stuff is happening. And it's like, Rick, one of the things you said at the beginning of the podcast was art is in this place where it's really hard to talk about because it's not where language lives. And I think that's my performing zone. There's no language. It's very feminine. And when you're in that, it just kind of flows. So for me, I have to empty out the intellect. I can do the intellect thing, like if I'm teaching and I need to talk about stuff. But if I'm performing, I can't do it, or else I can't perform. I can't reach that space of oneness from my head.
And that's so funny, because when you look at children, right, they have less of that, so they are animating themselves, and then also, like, you notice children just taking any inanimate object and animating them. It's so much that, because they don't have that thinking, like we're saying, oh my gosh, someone's looking, or how will my performance look, or it's like, I'm going to like take this cup on the table and this book and like make them have a conversation and, like puppeteering it out. They're not thinking about it where, if like saying like adults sitting in a waiting room and, we're trying to make up for that kind of empty space in that waiting zone. It's that same transition, like just letting it come through you, right? Like conducting that energy through.
What do you suppose that transition is? What's happening right there when we make that transition? That is such a cool moment. You're absolutely right. When something is emanating, and I think you said this a minute ago. I mean, we don't create it. I know I don't create what the things that come out of me. It's an idea that comes to me rather than the other way around, right? I mean, and you work hard. You do the technical stuff so that when it happens, you've got the skills to make something of it. But that whole flow.
And sometimes the flow is very like you really see it in the face. Like the way you say, like, oh, I can feel the tension in the room, or you can feel the inspiration, or like the static electricity in the room. Like, it really is true, because say you're sitting in a group brainstorming and someone has an idea, but if that person doesn't jump on, like, say, dancing, right? For example, like, just kind of like just going for it, not thinking. If you don't do it, that inspiration or that burst of energy jumps to the next person who's ready to, like, perform it or, like, unravel it out.
Yeah.
And it's, like, almost immediate. It's like, if here, it's like this burst of energy to do a couple of, like, taps with your feet. It's like, if you're not doing it, then that other person next to you might pick it up, and they might be leading it.
Well, so Lanvi, remember at the last bonfire when you and I were drumming?
Yeah.
That's kind of what happened. Exactly what happened.
and then if you can get on that same, it's like once someone starts kind of like leading that beat, right? And you open up that space and expand that same transition even larger. Say the transition is the bridge. If we open the, say, 1-lane bridge up to 2 lanes, right? A second person has been able to get in on that same beat and drum or dance, and you're in it. And then you continue kind of like expanding that transitional bridge out, and everyone can get in on it, and they start to drop off their thinking and just kind of go.
I think it's such a natural and spontaneous thing that people just do, but I don't see a lot of Westerners doing it. I think they're just too much in their head. They're too afraid. They're too grown up.
And individuality, right? That's also another thing. Maybe
science killed the wizard. I mean, that's part of what happened. I mean, science. In fact, I think we're going to talk about this in the future a little bit. But science sort of drove the magical, the magic, the music, a lot of that feeling out of the Western mind. You kind of have to be out of the stream of Western mind to really get into high performance. Or I'd have to think about how to say that. You can live in obviously you can live in New York City and do it all. I mean, that's what you do. But you have to kind of have withdrawn back into your own little green zone long enough on a daily basis, I think, to get regrounded and reset so that you can catch the signal. And I don't pretend to know what that signal is or where it comes from. But that
I think
signal
I know
is what
signal you're talking about.
yeah, but that signal is everything, really. And you've got to tune your own self. That's sort of the private performance that I think is just as important as the public one. Is no matter what the art, whether we're drawing, and I also paint, by the way. I got paintings hanging up everywhere. But whether you're doing that or out in front or playing, complimentary for somebody else or whatever, however you're doing it, it's just so important that you get that what we're calling the flow, I guess.
No. The expression's going to be so different.
Energy transfer,
like you're saying, Rick. It's going to come out in all form, like that same flow you're talking about. You can all tap into it, but it will be expressed differently. The performance would be uniquely different, but expressive of the same thing.
It's so much fun when you can pull 2 people and 3 people and 4 and 5 and 6 people who are sort of generally trained and working together. And when that starts to happen, that is amazing. Yes, that's just amazing. And that creates energy, and that takes the life that's out there around us and amplifies it. I have a theory about that, about a 6-fold amplification, but it probably takes too long to explain right this minute. But I think when you express one of the primary shapes in the universe really is a hexagon, and I think we kind of express ourselves in hexagons, and art is like that first form, that first one that's going out in 6 directions and connecting to that many new directions, which spreads, like the waves of the ocean, honestly. Yeah, and it's an amazing thing. I love to perform. I love to draw. I love to share stuff. I sit here and play guitar by myself. I could just entertain myself all day long with a guitar. In fact, I do that sometimes, but not so much anymore. But anyway, the ability. It's just fascinating that the ability to be that unit of transference, that thing that's collecting energy from one place, giving it some sort of spirit and soul, and moving it to another place. I love that moment. And I don't really think about it all that often. It's not like a conscious thing. You're just doing it. And I think that's what the flow is when you kind of feel that you're doing the right thing. You know that this moment is very good, and the people around you are having a moment that's very good, and that's an amplifier. That's a huge amplifier.
And I think people get scared. What Laura was saying about earlier, like it being more of a Western thing where maybe there's more thinking involved, or that the individual is more important than the expression, whereas the Eastern culture is more, community and focused as a whole. Like we can all tune into that same flow, but the expression is so uniquely different. But it's that transition part of all getting into that same wave, like you were saying, that people are thinking that they're losing their identity. But really, they're forgetting that how they express that same frequency is what's making it unique. But it kind of comes afterward. You know how it's like, oh, let me get into painting, or like I want to take a photo, but then you think that, oh, everybody's doing it. It's so the same, but then not until you jump into it. You find like that unique like note within that expression.
Well, I think another thing that gets in the way of that is judgment. So if you're thinking about, is it any good? Is it pretty? Is it melodic? Is it, and I think because of the way that we're brought up in the West, from the time you're in first grade, you're graded. This is not good enough. That's not good enough. This is what you should have done better. And so we get in the habit of thinking in that way, and you can't really create from that space. I don't think. I can't create from that space.
Did you know they started... Well, the grading system, like that's why they were changing the grading system. It wasn't based on grading anymore. Like they were saying that maybe instead of ABC, a grading scale that maybe youth should be given just like a different grading, like stickers of random things that don't have a hierarchy in them.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I think with some things there are math is right or wrong. I mean, but I mean, I think with I don't know. I think you can make somebody a good writer by giving them skills, and I think skills are quantifiable. But I don't think we can grade somebody's passion, or we can grade their ideas or their creativity. So I used to host a belly dance contest. And when I first started it, people were like, I don't know about that, because it's a folk dance. How can you say who's the better folk dance? Right. But we were grading skills. So how is your let me think of what some of the criteria was. So we had grades on costuming, which was not that that didn't really matter that much. I mean, everybody likes aesthetics, but point-wise, that what didn't really matter. And then you had the artistry aspect, and then you had technical aspects. So, like, if your timing was not on the beat, you're going to get dinged for that. That's a technical thing. So I do think that there are things, with the yin and the yang that can be quantified, but I don't think creativity is one of them, because it ebbs and flows, and it is very individual.
It took me about 40 years to get over worrying about what, or at least to begin to get over worrying about what other people thought of my art. I remember practicing my guitar one day, and when my kid walks in, and he goes, "Dad, that's just terrible." That hurts. But it took a long time. The point is, it took a long time to learn to not care much. I think I've in the last few years I've come to that point where I'll put it out whether it looks good or not. If it works for me, if the spirit's in it and it's moving and something out there.
You're the first critique,
Yeah.
As long as you're happy,
it's going out there.
Yeah.
It's going out there. I don't care. Yeah. But anyway, that's. It's one of the things that's I don't know if I say requisite in art, but it's definitely important that you don't really care what other people are thinking and doing and saying and smelling and being. It's just kind of you got to let all that go, because they can't serve two masters. I think I've heard some masters say at one point, and I kind of hear that. Yeah, you either have to devote to the practice of being the interpreter, or not, basically. Yeah.
Well, too, I think that when I was teaching dance, we would purposely make mistakes. Because in the mistakes you can find really, really awesome ideas. You know, because if you follow the rules all the time and do what everybody else does, that's not all that creative. And it may be aesthetically pleasing, but it probably lacks a spark because it's not very original. So we would jump on those mistakes and be like, oh, God, let's do that again, you know? I mean, sometimes
those mistakes are your next song, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's your next dance. Like, those are the mistake move of one dance is the footing ground of the next dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that moment right as indecision hits when you're on stage, and it can go either you don't have a line or somebody's thrown something weird, and there's that minute where things can either get really good or really go south, right? And that's a great moment. I've had me personally, but not so much me personally, but I've seen other performers have just marvelous moments off of that sort of thing, where something crazy happens, and because it relates back to animism too. It's because they're just in the moment. They're there. They're thinking. Or not. They're thinking by not thinking, or the other way around. But they're able to ad lib through it, and ad libs are sort of that homogenizing of the consciousness around you too. I love ad libs. Anyway, that's a big piece of, in general, it's a big piece of performing, to be able to just kind of forget what people think and do your thing at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I think that's when you see the truest pictures of a person, is when they're ad-libbing, and there's no script, because we do what we rehearse mentally. What's deep inside, that's what comes out. So for good or for ill.
Exactly. At that second right there is when you see whether you have the when you know kind of which way your intuition is going, and lining up the intuition with the consciousness around you is that connects, and that works. I love it. Mm-hmm. It's hard to do, but Seinfeld was always good at that. Live, not. But anyway, long story. Probably don't want to talk about stars and all that. But,
I was thinking about the mistakes that then, like when you recognize how treasurable those mistakes are, which it's not even a mistake, right? Because it's like it's like half ideas. It's like within the performance piece, right? What you consider perfect are like the ideas, right? Full ideas, like one idea, two ideas. Maybe the performance is consisted of 3 ideas. And then there's like half ideas. That's what we would consider like the mistakes, right? But then if you have all these half ideas that are popping up, then just think what you got. You've got all these other pieces already built ahead of you.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
So then you piece all those like half ideas. You have already set up like the next like 1, 2, 3, and 4 ideas. And then if you take those pieces, it's actually like say 4 other pieces. Like with visual art, like my hardest problem is that I can't stop creating, and like sometimes the creation process is exponential because there's so many half ideas and half pieces that are building simultaneously as you're working on, like, say, your perfect piece, right? Your one piece. But then there's like 10 more pieces that pop up. And as you continue working on those 10, it's just like this fractal thing where those 10 pieces, like the scraps or say the extra swatches on the side, becomes more pieces that you create out from it. So
yeah, I've seen your process. That definitely describes it.
So the performance is kind of like the performance is kind of like on steroids, where your main performance, say, is ballet, and suddenly you throw in some, say, tango moves, and it seems out of place in that specific dance, and you've got some waltzing involved. Laura's seen it. So same with visual art.
It's
like where does it end? So then you've got, a tango piece, a waltzing piece on the side, some Roomba, like.
So I love that idea about the mistake being a half piece. I like that. In fact, I'm putting that. I saw Lego.
But it gets dangerous. Here's the thing: it gets dangerous because when you acknowledge how precious and valuable those half incomplete or mistakes, right? It becomes treasures, and so it's collecting. And you're like, they're each little seeds, they're each little pods, ready to just add water and sunlight, and then it's like poof, you've got another tree in the corner, but you didn't know. And they're all waiting. I'm going to feed that with the unicorn, that's for sure. That's cool. I like that.
Anyway.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what happens in life just really depends on how you look at it. Because if you're a perfectionist and you're, always wanting things to look a certain way and be very uniform and, have a certain reaction every time, you're never going to get that. You're never going to get that because you'll reject those things.
And then you're going to just see all these trash and mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just saying it's all valuable. If it's your experience, it's your life. I mean, you don't have to take it all with you, but it is all valuable. So this is kind of in a different direction, but what you were saying, Lanvi, kind of made me think of it. But what do y'all think of when you were talking about, throwing a little waltz in there, throwing a little this in there? Mm-hmm. What do you think about merging styles with whatever? Any thoughts about that?
Oh my gosh, I think everything should be a fusion of it, because if we are we're fixated on perfecting one thing, and then if we're looking at what's not that one thing as, not their main thing, then all those half pieces and all those ideas become just piles of trash. But if we've seen them as treasure now, as half pieces, then we should have more pieces that are made of fusion pieces, right? Because now we have a mountain of scrap, say scrap papers, right? Like you might be cutting one shape from a big piece of paper, but think of all those scraps. And now making from the scraps, everything will be a fusion of many things. It should be a mosaic. Like for me, I don't.
How does the signal come to you? How do you know when you're about to be able to create something? I mean, what is it that says, "Hey, go sit down and do this"?
I think it's how you're seeing it. It's like, do I see let me use the example of, say, a painting. If the painting on the canvas is the main painting, or if all the scrap pieces of swatches on the side are the collective fusion of your painting, of the one on the canvas, then all the smaller pieces of scrap put together, that might draw you more in, making a full and large, tapestry of the smaller swatches and throw-aside pieces, like your test
I hear what
swatches.
you're saying. I see the mistakes come through to the next set of pictures. Like if I'm working on one thing and I go, "Oop, that doesn't look right," that might show up 3 pictures down the road. Yeah,
you might end up making the scrap your main piece. That might be the masterpiece instead of the one on the canvas.
In another context, yeah. Mistakes might just be contextual. Maybe there are no mistakes.
The canvas might be like what people, what would be really cool is that, the artist's sketchbooks, right? Their notebooks, their little side doodles and their notes, that becomes the masterpiece that we're looking and examining as the main piece on the wall, instead of the piece that they have laid out and placed nicely in frame or mat on the canvas.
I have to admit, I keep some of those sketchbooks around, and I keep them sort of private, and because I don't know what the kids are going to think when when I'm gone and they pick up all these books. I don't even want to know.
We're making people do work. When we put the clean piece on the wall, or say when we put that music sheet, or say that dance that we performed on stage, we're making people do a lot of work for how we got there. And it's not even the most valuable part. How we came up with those steps, say some of the foot footage is behind the scene, that's way more valuable. And that it's kind of like whether you teach a man how to fish or you give him a fish. It's like all of that behind the scene is what people would be paying for. Like that's the gold there. It's like the polish, yes. Yeah.
That is the thing that's valuable. That's the thing that we're transferring right there. It's that moment. Yeah.
And I think that's why, like before, was saying like teaching and kind of like passing on this knowledge of appreciating every element, like every piece assembled to the whole, because you never know like what part goes where. And it's like you've got this whole toolbox. If you can acknowledge all the pieces, it means you have all the tools in the toolbox. And then it's just a matter of fusion. Now it's only fusion because there's no one or the other. It's everything is a fusion of what we already have.
Well, but I do think context matters because to make this how you do anything, how you do everything. So for me, like with the culture and to say there's no difference between cultures, I think no, there is difference between cultures. I like having differences between cultures, and we can still have blending somewhat. We can share, but I think if you start making a mess of things, then it blurs the lines, and then it doesn't become that anymore, which happens organically. But I don't think that. I think there's a difference between. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a balance of the yin and the yang. I like structure. I don't think we should totally do away with structure, but I think we have to mess with that in order to be creative and in order for that evolution to happen.
I have an analogy for you visually. So it's like if the difference is like, say, all the beans, right? Like different types of beans, different colored beans, like all the grains, right? Rice, red beans, black beans, putting all in a bottle, right? And you're still seeing all the separateness of it, but it's all like a homogeneous mixture. But it's still very separate grains, right? But it's not like we cooked it down and made it into like, like mashed potato. It's not like that. Like it's not muddy. Like you're like, ew, what is in the can?
Right.
But it's still beautiful beans. Yes.
Yes. I like when things are, if you're going to mix, I like when it's done tastefully and you can still see what is what. So if you're doing tango, I like to see that tango footwork or spirit or something that I could still see that it's tango. Not that you're just, throwing the tango away.
The transition is smooth.
Music moves along lines in that regard, and you can, I think you have a lot more leeway in terms of ways you can mix styles. You can go from a sort of, it's really about, you have to keep the times across the two spectrums. But if you in a 4/4 beat, for instance, you can go from sort of a tango waltzy kind of thing to just hard acid rock and come right back, and it's kind of cool.
The juxtaposition, like how you juxtapose it.
Excuse me. I was thinking the same thing about when I draw pictures. On a lot of the pictures that I draw, there's this one little place that's just not part of the picture. It's like, what is that? And it's sometimes they're ridiculous, and sometimes it's just kind of cool. I mean, so that the trend, I guess it's all about context. It's like we were talking about everything else. Everything is in context, and the way you transition is contextual. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think everything needs context, and without context, then it becomes really muddy.
And similarly to what we were talking about earlier, if you don't have the chops, if you don't have, in any kind of art, the first thing you have to have is the structure. I think it was Picasso that said you have to learn the rules so you know how to break them. Well, you got to have structure. You got to have, it's not talent, it's just the accumulation of practice. And the being able, we're talking about the signal, being able to collect the signal, whatever that is, just kind of staying open to it, doing whatever physical stuff or meditatives or whatever you have to do. Stay open to the signal.
Yeah, I think if you're plugged into the signal, that always has structure. And no matter what comes out, even if you don't know the first thing about anything, never been to school before, don't know what you're talking about, don't know the lingo, it's going to have structure. But I think I'm probably a snob, but yeah, I'm honest about it. One of the things that I would just hate as an audience member is seeing sloppy stuff with no structure. And I know that is just judgy as heck, but I like to know what I'm looking at. And if I can't feel the soul in it because you've taken the structure out, then it just feels uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Am I being judgy, or are you following me?
No, I think you have a good point. There's still an anchoring point somewhere. So some often, you still need a point of anchor.
There's the technicians look at this, and then there's the audience look at it. There's two different things, and I agree. But I guess I was coming from the technician sort of, like this sort of a how-to. Yeah, your larger point is very well taken. I mean, you can't throw a monkey wrench into your own story. You have to, whatever it is you do that kind of creates energy and interest, has to still be in keeping with that 4/4 beat, right? I mean, you can't get out of the beat. You can change the flavor, but you can't get out of the beat. Once you got the beat rolling, as
long as you have that, I'm good. If we got some bones to hang that thing on, I'm good. Do whatever you want.
Bones. Yeah, we got bones. We got bones.
Yes.
That's funny.
But I think nature is just, there's sacred geometry in everything, and if you're flowing with nature, you're good. You're good. Nature has structure.
And she also has rhythm. I can tell you.
Absolutely.
That is the one thing you can count on, which is so funny, right? Mother Nature, you think of it always changing, but within that change, that is the constant. The flux is the thing you can count on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, my favorite thing is the bonfire, I have to admit. When you're at the bonfire and the fire is going, that creative juice is out there, and everybody's just jamming and doing their own thing, the way that, however that is, if you're singing, if you're dancing, if you're drumming, if you're doing whatever, humming, and all that stuff starts clicking, especially with people you don't know, and that happens, that's just so juicy. I love when that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really a performance, but it
is, really, though. It is a performance. If you think about it, that fire's doing the same thing we're talking about. The fire, and I think maybe this is part of where the energy comes from in a fire, it's oxidating, too. It's pulling the oxygen, the energy from around itself into something and transforming it into something else. And it's another one of those points of transformation. And I think because when you get close to that, you probably start to feel that that's straight out of animism. I mean, it's the consciousness moves, and something about that fire, and I don't really know the physics of it.
Well, you've seen the way the fire changes shape, right? It's
color
because it's performing. Yeah, it's because it's performing. And then as we move around it, we are all performing and molding and shaping that too. So it's subtle. Like, I think the performance, when like we were all speaking of earlier, whether it's on a personal or a public level, and then like how subtle it is, sometimes it's almost, for example, the log, it's performing, but it's like posture is more like sturdy and rock-like, right? So that, kind of like when you watch like acrobatic performance artists, like someone's got to like kind of like be like that little mound at the bottom while like the other people stack up and they're dancing and like spinning dishes or juggling or whatever. Someone's got to still stay still, and even in that stillness, that's a performance act too. For sure.
That person is absolutely critical to that moment. Yeah.
Like their stillness, if they're not still, there's no performance.
That's right. And the person jumping isn't going to jump with a whole lot of enthusiasm.
Nope.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to acknowledge too in a even a performance group. The stillness and the person being that rock is and then responsible.
That's something I've learned from working much of my career. I'll be honest, but we're working around men. But when as I've come in the last 15, 20 years to be around a lot more women, I've noticed that there's a lot more sensitivity to being that rock that you're talking about, to being the team player. There's how to put it? It's not that guys aren't team players; they are, but there's a patent difference between the way men and women look at that situation. It's very interesting. It's I'm not sure how that relates back to art, but I actually kind of does.
I hear
art is feminine. Art is very feminine. Yes, art is definitely a feminine pursuit. Not a feminine pursuit, a yin pursuit. It's definitely a yin pursuit in most forms. Some kinds of rock and roll are very yang. But I'm sorry.
What if it was half and half? Like we were talking about, like that transition, like the bridge, like like entering into the art, right? Is very feminine, but the execution of it, you gotta say, like the the laying of, like, say, the paint or the burst of how the paint splashes, it's very yang and very masculine too. That's true. You know, especially the tools used. I mean, come on, like the camera, the lens, you're shooting it. Everything is a very phallic, and you know, the execution of it is very masculine, but the fluid that flows up until that moment is very feminine, right?
You know what's funny? I bet it's about 50-50, and I'm over here on the guy's side, you're over there, and we both see it as like moving to the middle. So that's interesting. Yeah, because the middle's where
building
the
up to that climax, like building up to that crescendo is there's a splitting point in the artistry.
And that's the hexagon. When you split right there, it goes 6 ways. It hits 6 more. Yep. Yes, I love that. And how to create, and it's kind of like it's kind of like another kind of climax. It's hard to create. You know, I mean, it takes work.
Exactly. And that energy is the yang to kind of push and project it forward.
Fair enough. That's cool.
That's how the tie rises, right? the feminine of the water is moved and shifted because of, you know, the sun and the moon, and then it goes back to the light. So it's not water, and the female isn't going to move if you don't have the male and the energy to move it.
I got that. Okay. Lanvi, I want to ask you a question. Lanvi, the stuff that you do is really interesting. I've seen the posts where you definitely are bringing several styles, or several different kinds of modes together. Yeah, I got you. That's pretty funny.
Well, and that's the part that I sometimes, like, I feel like it's an overwhelming of the flow, because like you're saying, Rick, like, I don't know what. Like, am I doing Tai Chi and yoga with some blocks laid down, or am I painting, or, like, you know, like sometimes there's so many levels of it going on that the expression is, which is the opposite of most people who are like, oh, I don't have a hobby, or I don't know how to express myself. You know, like I have the opposite, where I'm like, I don't know if what I'm feeling should come out in the painting, my physical body, or music, or, you know, between a pen and a pencil is already enough to drive me nuts. So that's my problem.
I hear you. Same here. There's more thoughts to think than there are seconds to breathe. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
We definitely covered some ground here. Thank you guys for being here, and thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. Come and see us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We'd love to talk to you. And if you have anything to add to our podcast, give us some comments. We'd love to hear. So don't forget, if you'd like to donate, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Pan Society. I'm Laura Giles with Rick West and Lanvi Nguyen. see y'all next week. And you can see us all on our private Facebook group. So hope to see you there. Ciao.
Thank you for having us.
Bye. Yes, thank you.